Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining. We wanted to wait a couple of minutes to give everyone a few minutes to get prepared. I think we have everybody who is going to be joining us this afternoon, and we can go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Yvonne Bonilla. Here in the webcam. I'm the Always Puberty Communications expert, and I'm really excited to talk with all of you today. We really know the positive impact that you're making every day on the lives of the girls' teams, and first of all, we just want to thank you for the work that you do. Throughout this webinar, we're going to give you some background on our latest end-period poverty program, as well as introduce you to some of our amazing experts that will provide you with the tips on how to talk about puberty-related topics with the girls on your teams. To kick us off, I did want to tell you a bit about why I'm really proud to work with Always team and why we're so excited about our end-period poverty program with Walmart. So, as we know, we've all been through puberty, and we know it can be a really hard time. Actually, we've learned and research indicates that more than half of the girls experience a really sharp drop in confidence at this moment in time during puberty, with her first period marking the lowest point in confidence. And we know it's a very confusing time for girls. Many lack the information and support they need to be prepared for these changes that they experience. So that's why, for Always, it's been critical, and we've made it our mission to help build girls' confidence at puberty. For over 35 years, we've been working really hard to empower millions of girls around the world through puberty and confidence education, as well as provision of products to those girls in need. Additionally, the Always Like a Girl campaign has helped tackle some key societal barriers to her girls' confidence, especially those felt at the start of puberty. As a part of all this work that Always has been doing, we recently found out that nearly 1 in 5 girls have missed school in the U.S. because they didn't have access to the products they needed to manage their periods. And that's pretty shocking. It's been pretty alarming when we've shared this recent learning. We wanted to help change that, so last August we launched our End Period Poverty campaign for the first time here in the U.S. And as you can imagine, when girls don't have the products they need, it isn't just school that they miss, but also they miss out on the activities that they love. And this can have a really huge impact on their overall confidence. So that's why Always has partnered with Walmart to help provide products to help keep girls in these activities that they love and will help keep them confident. In fact, we're providing 50 teams across all 50 states with a year's worth of period products, and that's where you all come in. So we're really excited that together with your support, we can help keep these girls in the after-school activities that they love and that are so important to their mental and emotional development. One of the key takeaways we want you to have from this session is that by providing your teams with a year's worth of pads, that's only part of the solution. We also want to provide you with the right tools to help you create an open and supporting environment that will help foster girls' growth and confidence through puberty and beyond. That's why we're really excited to have our confidence and period experts here today with us to provide you with this valuable information. Now, I want to introduce you to our webinar moderator, Lisa Reifenberg, who is part of our Always team working on our effort, and will be leading you through the next portion of our webinar. Thanks again for your participation. Take it away, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that intro, Yvonne. Good afternoon. First things first, I want to introduce you all to our 2 experts. First, we've got our confidence expert, Rachel Simmons. Rachel's a New York Times bestselling author and the co-founder of Girls Leadership. She coaches girls and the people who love them on how to navigate puberty with confidence. And I also want to introduce you to our period expert, Dr. Melissa Holmes. Dr. Holmes is an MD and the co-founder of Girlology, and she specializes in working with girls of this age group. So during this portion of the webinar, we want to equip you with puberty and confidence information that will hopefully help you feel empowered to answer girls' questions or concerns and support them as needed this season. Note that we will have time at the end of the webinar to go over any questions you might have, so feel free to make note of them either in the question portion to the right of your screen or on paper as we go along so that you don't forget. And now, Rachel and Dr. Holmes, I'd love for you each to introduce yourself and let us know what made you want to be involved with this particular program. We'll start with you, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Rachel Simmons. I'm a lifelong educator and also the author of several books about girls' psychology, as well as the co-founder of the national nonprofit Girls Leadership. And I first got involved in serving girls when I decided to write about my experience of being a target of bullying. And just as with the discussion of periods and bodies, the topic of bullying was also rarely discussed. And so girls didn't really talk a lot publicly about some of the psychological aggression that we experienced. And so my first book, Odd Girl Out, was an attempt to break that silence. I'm really thrilled to partner with Always on another silence shattering initiative. I've been working with Always for many years now, and I really believe their heart is in the right place when it comes to serving girls. So it's an honor to be with you today.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Holmes?
Yeah, I'm an OBGYN, and I have a specialty in pediatric and adolescent gynecology, which sounds like a really tiny area of medicine, but we spend a lot of time working with adolescent girls and their families on general health, but especially a lot of time on puberty and periods. And also, as the founder of Girlology, we offer puberty and sexuality and general health programs and classes for parents and their daughters. And, you know, through my time as a doctor and my time just out in the community teaching classes and programs, I get questions all the time from girls and their caregivers about all of these topics, you know, periods, puberty, general health. And one of the things, you know, young girls just worry a lot about what they don't know. They worry about their bodies. And the interesting thing is what they worry about doesn't really require a lot of deep medical knowledge. It mostly just requires support and some reassurance to help them understand, you know, what their body's doing and to feel more confident about what's going on. And I think that's why I'm most happy to be part of this program, where we're training you as their supporting parents to have resources, you're getting products, and you're going to get some great insight today to help your teens kind of more holistically as they journey through this time in their life. Super critical. So I've also enjoyed working with Always over the years on educational programs and a free ebook that we have on our website that is available to all your girls as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holmes. So as you guys heard, through our research, Always uncovered the startling fact that half of girls lose confidence at puberty and many never fully recover. And we know that the onset of puberty often marks the lowest moment in confidence for girls. So Rachel, my first question is for you. Let's talk about some functional tips. Can you share with us some ways that we can build girls' confidence and support her growth in this important life stage?
Definitely. I think we have a lot of practical tips at our disposal as educators. So first, I've had a lot of success getting girls out of their comfort zone and building their confidence by taking bigger goals and breaking them down into smaller ones. So for example, let's say a girl wants to try out for a school play and she feels really scared to do that, really scared to either sing in front of the director and the other people or scared to do a monologue. How do we break that big goal down into small bites? So first of all, I think it's super important to keep in mind that many girls both want to please adults, they want to do everything right, and they believe their mindset is that like it's all about the big moment where they perform and excel. And many of them really struggle to appreciate the process of change and of growth. And so what we want to do is instead of telling them that it's all about doing something that really scares them and slaying the dragon, we say to them, listen, you will be more confident if you take smaller steps that don't terrify you but make you nervous. That if you push yourself out of your comfort zone and instead of just walking right into the audition totally terrified, maybe this week you focus on just singing in front of the mirror. And then maybe later on this week you decide to sing in front of a friend. And then next week you record yourself singing and you play it for some friends. And with these small risks and these small ventures outside your comfort zone, you begin to build the confidence that prepares you for the big moment. And if you're an athletic coach listening, think about a particular risk on the field or on the court you want a girl to take and how I work with a lot of athletic teams. and how you can break that down into smaller bites and how you can leverage the other teammates to really support that risk taking. Another thing we want to keep in mind is that when girls succeed, and even when they don't, we can, instead of being like, yay, you're so amazing, which for a girl who's trying to please others can make her feel like I have to be amazing, otherwise I won't be worthy. Instead, when they succeed, we want to say things like, you worked really hard, like recognizing their effort, or ask them, tell me about the strategies that you used to do what you just did. Like, how did you figure that out? Tell me what you were thinking about as you took that step that I just watched you take, because it was really impressive. And you can ask that even if they fall short, again, because you want to help them appreciate the process, the effort, and it's not always about the outcome. The second thing you can do to cultivate confidence is, as the educator, as the adult, to remember to model self-compassion when you make a mistake. I don't know about you guys, but I make mistakes in front of my students all the time. I'm working on a college campus. I'm with young adults a lot. I recently took a trip with my students and I had a huge scheduling snafu. And instead of being like, oh, I'm such an idiot, I can't believe I screwed this up for everyone, I was very conscious that the girls were watching me and watching how I managed a mistake. And so I asked myself, what would I say to one of my students if they made that mistake? And that's how I spoke to myself. I said, well, I'm really sorry. I feel kind of embarrassed. And I can kind of understand why this happened because I'm overwhelmed with all of these responsibilities being in charge of this trip. So I didn't beat myself up in front of them, but I talked to myself the way that I would talk to one of the students that I cared about, keeping in mind that they are really watching and learning, and that how we talk to ourselves can deeply shape how they talk to themselves. And finally, I think it's super important to remember that you don't get confident as like a one and done big moment. This is a muscle that you have to flex over and over and over again, which is why I can't stand the phrase, do something that scares you every day. Because I feel like, wouldn't you be exhausted if you were doing something that scared you every day? But if, on the other hand, every day we try to gently leave our comfort zones and do something that made us nervous, that's how we build the muscle of confidence. And if we don't try, if we don't keep practicing, that muscle really starts to atrophy. By the way, when we praise effort and when we talk about, what strategy did you use to get to where you're going, that's called process praise. So we're really teaching girls who can be so perfectionistic to focus on the process and the journey rather than the outcome and the achievement.
Thank you so much. And how can we help girls feel more empowered to talk about topics that might make them uncomfortable, whether it's a period or something as simple as needing to ask for help or admitting when they don't know something?
Well, I think it's really important to name the discomfort. Like, I don't think it serves us to pretend that like some of these topics don't make us uncomfortable too. So it's okay to name the elephant in the room and be like, yeah, this is kind of an uncomfortable topic. And if you're working with middle schoolers, it's kind of impossible to have this conversation without some people cracking up. So I think that's okay. Like, the more that they get comfortable with it, the less funny it will become. But, it's okay to lean into the laughter and just say, like, sure, this is uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it. It actually means when we're uncomfortable about something, that's often a signal that we do need to talk about it so that we don't feel that way anymore. So it's okay to laugh. I think middle schoolers, though very concrete, have a very funny sense of humor, and just go with it. And then, of course, as you'll hear soon, there are lots of practical ways you can start to decrease that discomfort.
Thank you so much. And then if we've got boys in the club, how should we involve them in this conversation to ensure that they're helping to create a supportive environment? So, for example, if one of the girls in your group happens to get her period while you're all together, is there anything that we can do to kind of set that baseline and ensure that that environment feels a little safer for her?
Sure. I think it's just very important to have any group that I work with as an educator, like, we always have ground rules for how we want to treat each other, what we need from each other in order to feel safe and comfortable. And so I think as a baseline, understanding that everyone's body no matter what it looks like, is deserving of dignity and respect, is just like a basic foundation for how we relate to each other in a group. My suggestion would be have that conversation early. It's not a conversation, it's a conversation that's a lot harder to have after someone gets their period in front of everyone else. But if it's part of a mutual contract that all the kids make with each other and that they make with you and you with them, I think it's much harder to move into a situation where there is that kind of embarrassment with the expectation that we're going to treat this person in this situation with the utmost respect.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And yes, of course, we know it can be uncomfortable, but agree that that open environment is really important. Dr. Holmes, a question for you. Once we've sort of established this open environment, specifically, how should we talk about periods and the changes that girls might be experiencing?
Yeah, well, there's no question that talking about periods and body changes can be awkward and uncomfortable for everyone, but it is important that girls feel really supported from early on. So once you get your laughing out of the way, if that needs to happen, as caring adults, we actually need to get over our own discomfort first. And I assure you that the more you talk about it, the easier it's going to get. So when you're talking with girls about periods and their bodies or anything that's really awkward like that, there's always two things that I remind people to do. First is drop the drama, and second is normalize normal. So let's talk about dropping the drama first. If you're doing that, you're doing things like you're not shying away from the conversation, because when you avoid a conversation that feels awkward, you're just going to perpetuate the idea that that topic is off limits, and you don't want your girls to think that. Another way to drop the drama is just to stay calm with your voice and your body language and your facial expressions. Teenagers, preteens are not very good at interpreting body language and facial expressions. And so when you look surprised, sometimes they think you're angry. So one of the great rules for parenting and coaching and mentoring young girls and boys really is to understand how to stay calm and how important that is for them. And then you're also just going to use proper terms for body parts, because when we use derogatory words or even silly words for things like the vulva or vagina, it's going to add to the idea that our private parts are dirty or taboo, and that breeds shame and embarrassment, which is exactly what we're trying to get rid of. There is nothing shameful or embarrassing about our bodies or the way they function, and using the right words for our body parts helps girls to start realizing that. And, that's not to say you can't have fun or have private words that are kind of jokes. I mean, girls love to say, it's Shark Week. I mean, my daughter says that all the time. So it's okay to have fun, but also have those serious moments as well. And then when we come to normalizing normal, that's pretty easy. I mean, basically, you're going to remind them things like periods are normal. They're a sign of health. And if it's a girl who's just starting her period, you can normalize what her experience is going to be. So, tell her, well, yeah, this is going to go on for about 3 to 7 days. It may be heavy at first and it may get lighter over time. If you have any worries, feel free to come to me. Just to reassure her that this is a normal experience. You also want to let her know that she's not alone. So that's another way to normalize normal. Period accidents are so common. So if you have a girl that's having a period accident and she feels embarrassed, just making her know that that's common can be reassuring. And then, just to kind of sum that all up, I think that when we share our collective experiences with our periods or our body issues or other topics that are awkward or experiences that are difficult, we really help girls feel a lot more normal. And I think that helps develop their confidence a lot.
Thank you so much. What should we do if a girl in our care is actually surprised by her period while we're together? Is there any advice that you have for that specific situation?
Yeah, so that's bound to happen at some point. So it's really great to be prepared. First, I'd make sure she's not scared. If it's her first time ever having a period, she may need more support through information like I was just talking about. But be sure to treat it positively and maybe even give her a high five instead of like calling it a curse or complaining like, oh boy, this is horrible. We want to keep it positive. If she's had a period before, she may just need a pad or may need a change of clothes. But so either way, I think there's a few easy next steps that you can take. I mean, number one, if you feel awkward, just first realize that by coming to you, she's shown you a sign of trust, and that's incredible. So, even if it feels awkward, you're already, on the right track creating a support system for her. So in the vein of no drama and normalizing normal, you want to keep your no big deal attitude. You want to remind her that, every young woman's going to be surprised by your period at some point, or honestly, many points in their lives. And then at that point, you can ask her if she has some pads at home. She may need one at practice and have plenty at home, or she may not have any at home. So you may need to figure out, what her supply is. So that's kind of a good segue to help you decide if this is just a one-time thing for her, or maybe it's a part of a larger access problem.
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue to our next question, which is if we do suspect that a girl is suffering from period poverty or, from a repeat access issue, how should we approach that? Like, how can we offer support?
Yeah, that's a tough one because there's a lot of shame and tension around period poverty. The girl may not want to talk about it because she's embarrassed. She might feel protective of her caregivers for not being able to provide what she needs, or she might worry about just being judged or teased about that. So it's important to, number one, let her know that neither she nor her family have done anything wrong by not having period products. And I think that's a good time to remind her of that statistic you mentioned earlier, that nearly 1 in 5 girls in the U.S. have missed school because they didn't have period protection. So, I would make sure you're having this conversation one-on-one in private. Have a couple pads with you so that you can make that interaction really direct and natural. And if you discover that, her situation is ongoing, you might want to give her enough pads to get her through the cycle and make sure she knows how to track her period so she can anticipate what she needs or when she needs them next month. And helping young girls track their cycles is hard because their cycles aren't super regular, but they do start to develop a pattern. So if they watch them on a calendar, they really can start to predict. And it also might be a good idea to keep some pads in the bathroom during practice, or show the girls where they can get them so they can help themselves. And so then I think the other thing that's important is if you have a girl that's experiencing period poverty, you need to let her know what other resources exist within your community. You're doing a great service by having, supplies for her, but there are other resources like the school nurse or local food pantries. And I think it's important to also let her know that those are available and she shouldn't have to improvise period protection. And, some girls do, and women, with paper towels or socks or other materials. And I would make sure she knows that that's not hygienic, and it can lead to some irritation. It can actually lead to some gynecologic problems down the road. So I know that sounds like a sad thing to have a conversation about, but in the end, you can keep it really positive and just reassure her that you're there to help her all year long when this is, when something like this arises.
Thank you so much. Is there a point at which we should get parents involved? Like, when is it appropriate for us to manage the conversations on our own as activity leaders, and when is it appropriate to kind of bring in the big guns?
Yeah, so in the medical setting, it's a little bit different. And when you're in a school or after school activity, your rules may differ depending on where you live. So first, you need to check with your organization for any rules in your region. And then before you get your Always products, I think it would be great to send a note to the parents or guardians of the girls in your care and let them know that the organization's participating in this program. So that note should just inform the caretakers that you now have resources and pads on hand for the girls to benefit from this season. And if you need to in your location, sometimes you need parents to opt out if they don't want you talking to their girls about these kinds of things. So you can give them that option if that's necessary. And I think that'll prepare you before your first shipment gets there.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. I think that's really helpful. For our next section, we'd like to make this a little more interactive. So we've obviously shared a lot of information about the Always mission and some action steps to understanding, how to hold these conversations with the girls in your care. But we also have a couple of questions for you. So we're going to do a couple of quick polls. The first one is a little bit of a warm-up, and then the following questions will help us determine how to spend the remainder of the time that we have together. So we'll start with our warm-up question. In order to answer the polls, you should be able to click on the buttons on the right-hand side of your screen. Our first question is, when you learned about this program, were you surprised to hear about how many girls experience period poverty? And I'll give you all a few moments. Great, thank you so much. I think it's clear that the problem is much larger in our communities than a lot of us realize at first. So I'm really glad, and we're all really happy to have your involvement in this program, and hopefully we'll be able to really make a big difference for girls this year. Our second question will help Dr. Holmes and Rachel provide the best kind of advice as we move forward. So would love to know what kind of activity you oversee. Got a couple of different options here, academic clubs, sports activity, the arts, or other. Great. All right. It looks like we're pretty varied on this particular call. I can see that there's quite a few folks who oversee a sporting activity, but then there's a big majority of you who would classify the activity you run as other. So as we move into our open-ended questions, I would love to know what kind of activity you do oversee. It might help us fine-tune the answer to the question that you've got. Our third poll question is about what you'd like to see our experts expand on in the time that we've got left. We can talk confidence education. We can talk about the issue of period poverty and how to help. We can talk about overarching period education. All right, it looks like we're a pretty even split between confidence education and period education. So we'll move into our next section, which is an open-ended question. Specifically, do you have any questions that you'd like our experts to answer? And feel free, when you add your question in on the right-hand side of your screen, to give us a little bit of information about the type of activity that you oversee, as that will be helpful for us in answering it. So we'll give a few minutes for those to start to tabulate, and then I will read them aloud and direct them to the appropriate experts. All right, so our first question says, I'm a Girl Scout leader for 20 homeless tweens in New York City. What's a good group activity or game that would help put these confidence building skills into practice? Rachel?
This is a great question. I have so many of these. Okay, so I love a game. You need a room where you can all stand in a circle to play. It's called Circle Switch. And one person starts in the middle. That can be you. And the rules of the game are very simple. The people on the outside of the circle have to make eye contact with each other and agree to switch places. So in other words, one girl will make eye contact with another girl and sort of go, you know, do you want to switch? But they can't speak. And then they try to switch places across the circle. The person in the middle has to try to steal their spot before they get there. And if the person in the middle gets there before the girl trying to get to the new spot, then that girl who didn't get to her spot goes back into the middle, and then you keep playing. And the reason why this game is so great is because it helps them work on eye contact, because that they're practicing their nonverbal communication. And it's actually a hallmark of confidence to be able to look someone in the eye so you can talk with them afterwards about, you know, what was the skill that you used, and why is eye contact important, and how does it feel when you try to make eye contact with someone and they don't look back, or what message do we send when we make eye contact. So that is definitely one of my favorite games.
Thank you so much. We've got another question here. What if a student isn't receptive of my support and guidance? How can I better approach a conversation? So I think this question is likely twofold, whether it's confidence or whether it's puberty specifically. You know, how can you just kind of create an environment where you're going to get an openness from the girl that you're trying to speak to?
So I don't know if Dr. Holmes also wants to weigh in on this with respect to period conversations, but I would say that lots of students are more comfortable drawing or writing you a letter, or even if they have access to smartphones, typing you something and texting you something. So I think it's important to remember that, yeah, I mean, not every student is comfortable communicating, verbally or the way that we're comfortable, but we should not discount the fact that there may be other modes where they want to communicate. And I see Dr. Holmes is coming in, so I'll kick it over to you. Yeah.
I agree. When girls are having like a period issue in school, we always say, write a note to your teacher, and that's just the easiest way to communicate that privately. And I think girls also will open up once they establish trust. And if it's the first time you're encountering her, or you've just gotten to know her, she may not open up to you. So just let her know you're available, and this is awkward to talk about, but I'm here if you need me, and let it go. She'll figure out when she really needs to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Holmes, I've got another one for you. I'm a school nurse and head gymnastics coach. One of my girls lives in a home with a huge language barrier. Mom and dad speak Spanish, and she only speaks and understands English. Any suggestions for how to have these kinds of conversations when you've got a barrier like that in place?
In the medical world, we have interpreters who help with that, and that makes my job a lot easier. I'm so dependent on interpreters because we have a lot of Spanish-speaking patients. There are books that are available in English and Spanish, and it might be nice for them to read the same book at the same time. Girlology, shameless plug here, actually has There's Something New About You, which is our book on puberty, is available in English and Spanish through Amazon. And I mean, it might be nice to read them together. It's the exact same thing, and they could converse that way.
Thank you. So how do you approach a child who hasn't disclosed to me that they had their period, but I was made aware and would like to share information?
I'm a big believer in girls, telling you things when they're ready and not kind of exposing things that they don't want somebody else to know. But for instance, if she's had an accident and the kids are all talking about she has blood on her pants or something, then I think it is time to just step in and say, hey, listen, what's happened to you? Again, normalize normal. This is so common. Your empathy and your support may make her feel better and make her willing to open up. So sometimes we need to step in, but other times I like to let them and their friends kind of figure it out, and then they're ready to talk. Rachel may have something to add to that.
Yeah. Nope, I'm totally with you. 100% +1.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I have another question from a Girl Scout leader in Vermont who wants to know what we can do to end period poverty. I think that's a great question. I can take a stab at that one. I think that there are a couple of things that are really helpful. And I think first and foremost, awareness is really important, because there are a lot of people who don't understand how pervasive the issue is, here in the U.S. So I think that, working together to help destigmatize the issue of period poverty by sharing some of the statistics that we have here about how prevalent it is are really helpful. And then Dr. Holmes made the point earlier that you can familiarize yourself with what other support systems exist within your community where girls who have a need are able to get the supplies that they need. You'll see when we get a little later into our webinar that we've got some great leave behind materials that can help to facilitate this kind of conversation. So stay tuned for that. We've got another question here that asks, at this age group, are there any telltale signs of low self-esteem or low confidence that we can be on the lookout for? Rachel, do you want to field that one?
Sure. Yeah, I would say there are quite a few. So definitely going back to the eye contact point, there are some students who grow up in homes where culturally they have learned it's not respectful to make eye contact, and I would exclude that group from this. But for others who aren't growing up with those expectations, girls who struggle to make eye contact that may be a sign of not feeling confident in themselves. I think girls who really struggle to take risks are often displaying low confidence because they fear failure or they lack a sense of authority or agency, meaning a sense that, I have the skills to take on a challenge. Some other more subtle signs that you might hear from girls are girls who are really conflict avoidant. So they don't want to tell their friends how they feel. You may be encountering a social challenge on your team or in your group, and that girl just refuses to say anything to the other girl, will not stand up for herself. Some other signs that I have seen are girls who question their own feelings. So when you talk to them about how they feel, they might say something like, well, I shouldn't be upset, or I'm just overreacting, or I'm just being a drama queen, which is a kind of emotional, they lack emotional self-respect, so they don't take their own feelings seriously, which of course then affects whether or not they take their thoughts seriously as well. So that would be sort of a handful of things that I have seen in girls. I'm sorry I can't hear more from you about what you've observed, and I wonder if, Melissa, you also have anything that you would share in terms of your patients and what you see around their bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that you're saying. And, from my perspective as a health provider, it's really about some of the risky behaviors that they engage in. One of the things that we know is that adolescents must take risks. Risk-taking is important, but when they're taking unhealthy risks, I think that's one of the biggest signs that, we really are dealing with some confidence issues and self-esteem issues.
Thank you both so much. Dr. Holmes, I think this next one is for you as well. The question is, how do I talk to a child about their hygiene during puberty? So for example, how do you let someone know they can start wearing deodorant or something like that?
So, boy, we talk about this all the time. So hygiene is a big issue as far as bullying goes. And there are a lot of girls who won't even recognize that they're having a hygiene problem. Like they may have body odor and they don't notice it first. So we try to be kind of like, again, normalizing it. Like, hey, did you realize that you've got some new smells now? And being able to talk to them about how to take care of them. A lot of girls think they can just slap some deodorant on and they're fine. They forget about soap and water. And so we want to be able to encourage them to, without breaking them, about that this is normal and this is just what you have to do when you go through puberty. As your body changes, it's got new bacteria. Those bacteria mix with oils and sticks to oil. So it takes soap to get that off. That's just a really practical lesson that we can give them. I think one of the biggest hygiene issues that girls worry about is they are afraid that their period smells, or they're afraid that their private parts smell. And what's interesting is most of the smell that they're dealing with is actually body odor. Their periods really don't smell until those pads have been on for a while and they've also absorbed some of the oils and the sweat and the body odor that goes with it. So I think reassuring girls that people can't smell when you're on your period if you're washing every day. And so again, soap and water becomes important, and just a very simple measure to help them. But sometimes, as Rachel said earlier, middle schoolers are very concrete and they don't know how to wash. Like raise your arm, scrub around. I mean, you have to get specific with them and very concrete.
Thank you so much. I have time for one more question. This one's a pretty practical one. It's where should I put the product that comes in my donation shipment? So the answer to that one is it's really going to vary depending on what kind of facility you have access to, what kind of activity that you're running. Now is a good time to sort of take a lay of the land and see what could be a good option for you. I know Dr. Holmes talked about this a bit earlier on in the webinar, but it is nice if at least some of the products you're able to keep visible, if not readily available for the girls to take, depending on, how secure your facility is. Having it visible helps them have the conversation if there is something that they need. But given that these are larger shipments, it will probably be helpful to identify before your shipment arrives a closet, a stock room, someplace where you can handle the surplus until you're ready to use it. And I think that covers the amount of time and the questions that we've got here. If there is anything that you have on your mind that we didn't get to answer here, we're happy to collect those questions in follow-up to this conversation. But for now, I'm going to kick it back over to Yvonette to close us out. And you might be on mute, Yvonette.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. So I hope that there were some actionable tidbits and information that you can use with your teams this year. As you can tell, always, and our partners are really passionate about helping girls feel more confident at puberty and beyond as well. We're committed to doing what we can to support you and helping them through this journey. So hopefully you found today helpful. In terms of looking ahead, we do have some leave behind materials that we'll be sharing with you. Some reference materials that you can use to help support the girls. And here's a list of what you can expect from us. You'll be receiving an email from America's Promise that will grant you access to all of these materials. Feel free to reference these materials whenever you need to look back at our tips during this webinar, and feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have afterwards. So you'll be receiving a recording of the webinar. And again, you can reference key points that we discussed with our experts today. You'll receive digital copies of our puberty and confidence education curriculum that you can share with the girls' parents, or even reference for any facts if the girls have questions. We'll also send you a link to the video that tells the story of one of our teams in Miami, the Tiger Dragon Miami team, that you can see as well. We'll be sharing a tip sheet specific to confidence building and addressing period poverty in your groups. And then we also want to hear from you. We'll send you a form to capture any stories or photos that you're comfortable with sharing as the program rolls out. You can see the information there in our contact email. It's really great to be able to understand the impact that the program is having, as well as any feedback that you might have, so that we can continue to improve and expand these types of programs in the future. So again, we want to thank everyone for joining us today, for being such a strong support system for all the girls in your teams and in your extracurricular activities. I also want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for your time, and everyone, thank you for your thoughtful and amazing questions and for such an engaging discussion. Let's keep building girls' confidence together, and we wish you a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.